and it's because I'm using some of these services, is when you have a small business PBX, that's software that sort of crawls around, finds all the nodes, activates the nodes, keeps track of who's on each of those assigned nodes, and you don't have to do anything. And then when you want to call somebody, you say, call, Edward. If you want to transfer a call, you say, transfer call, Edward. This is and it's a small little thing. You know, really big gains don't come from necessarily fantastic new technology. It's a real simple thing. Voice activated, so I don't have to read the manual, and now I'll transfer a call if I can do that. And I never in 30 years of work life or whatever ever really learned much more than transferring a call in some of the PBX I've had to adapt. Now that's a small user interface thing, but it's really, really important in terms of end user experience and getting people to use all the features that are actually available that presumably help them improve productivity, right? It's just voice activation. Very small innovation. We know how to do it. Gets better every year. Really changes the end user experience. Now, in terms of that, you know, changing end user experience, anybody want to comment about other things that we actually ought to be doing so that it's actually pleasant to call people?
I actually want to ask a question to that exact same point. As a consumer, I agree with your point about commoditization of telephone or voice. I actually, as a consumer, would like to see the software-based solutions become more commoditized, such that if I'm a Skype user, I could call a Google Talk user. And I think that's one of the downfalls of some of the current software-based solutions is that there is no ubiquity. On a publicly switched phone, I could pick up a phone anywhere in the world and dial anywhere else in the world. And you know, it's a fully ubiquitous system globally, whereas the soft phones currently are not. So as a user, that would make things better, and also probably need it to be more of a commodity, I guess. But are there any work being done on standardizations in those areas?
Can we argue the standards aren't the issue?
Gary, you want to repeat the question maybe? I'm not sure everybody heard the question.
Okay. The issue is one of the barriers to users really being able to take full advantage of some of the soft phone clients is incompatibility. I mean, there's this walled garden community there and a walled garden community here and a third one over there. And really, what, if anything, is being done to make these things federated?
I think what happens is that, you know, some of those solutions, although they've been around for a while, are still fairly new, let's say, and that whenever those new solutions come out, it takes a little bit of time before everything, everybody coalesces around them and makes it happen. And it's a personal view, is that once the major telcos, telcos right now or major operators see a number of those players as threats. Right? So there is little incentive necessarily to work with them. Once a number of those solutions will be embraced, then also there'll be more interoperability. And I think that's happening. It's inevitable. Over time it will happen. But again, you just need to find the right timing, the right mix, and those things will happen. Because to a point that you made earlier, Gary, yes, some of those new technologies might be, for example, on the conference call play, might be threatening. My personal belief is that if it's easier for the consumer and priced right, you'll see an uptake in usage, and you'll see a different set of economics come there. And so I think embracing them will actually increase your revenue as opposed to, be a potential threat. And that's where making them available, they're different, and I think depending on the different companies and how it's being approached, some companies go in more as a go into the market and try to make it on their own. What we have decided is try to do it in partnership with the telcos. And the model we like to use is to look back at what happened in the music industry. For example, with Kazaa. Kazaa went out and said, we'll just make it on our own and we'll basically, make it happen. And the music industry said, no way. It's too much of a threat, and there are, there's too much revenue at risk. And also we have a brand, we have a consumer base, etc. And then iTunes came along, Apple came along with iTunes, and they said, well, we can actually make it work in cooperation with the industry. And guess who is around today? iTunes is very much of a major player, and the music industry has embraced it, whereas Kazaa is gone. And so I think that some of those technologies will come and will exist in cooperation. But I think you need major players in the industry to start embracing those in order for it really to happen on a large scale?
I'll pretend to be contrarian. I think it's a good question, and maybe one of the things that we'll see is that we never really will get complete unification for a lot of these services, because as these services become software services, maybe the pattern, maybe the landscape starts to look the way that application landscape looks right now, which is you always can have different photo processing programs or different word processing programs or different whatever type of programs. And so maybe that's part of what comes with the landscape, is that as we start to inject more software into telecom, maybe the ubiquity of dial tone goes away. I mean, maybe that's what happens when you really hybridize, is that you wind up with some of the fractured characteristics of what the application landscape looks like. The other thing I'd say is, I won't address the VoIP services like Skype directly, but telcos are in an interesting position to give ubiquity. Dial tone is the most ubiquitous thing in the world. So if you are a telco and you can find the courage to actually put a real API on top of your network, then what you're giving is a service to the development community that is ubiquitous. Again, that doesn't address Skype, for example.
You know, the other thing too is I think there's a sense that if you make the argument that a tier 1 telco cannot compete with Skype, I don't think that's true. In fact, I sometimes, just because I try different services to see how they work, will call the UK using Skype. Then I'll use Jaja, or I'll use MobiVox, or sometimes I want to test them on my mobile and so on and so forth, different use cases. I don't think Skype's the cheapest. And most people would say Skype's automatically cheapest. I can actually call, if I had BT's communicator, soft client loaded on my US machine, which I don't, obviously I'm not in London or somewhere, that would be cheaper than Skype just about anywhere I wanted to call, I'm pretty darn sure. And I've used the other services here. Skype is not the cheapest. And everybody thinks Skype's really cheap. So if BT can manage to make a business out of this, if Jaja can make a business out of this, if MobiVox and TruePhone and other folks can make a business out of this, it's not too far of a stretch to me to think, you know, create a business unit and figure out which of your customers want to do this sort of thing. People call globally. Why? A lot of immigration these days. Right? Your domestic customers have very high international calling needs. They've grown spectacularly. And if you're not trying to get a part of that, you're missing part of the revenue stream. Yes.
Can I answer? It's an interesting question, because when we launched the company two years ago, one of our objectives was exactly that, to have users of different community be able to talk to each other. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of time to do that. Every network, every community is different, so you need to implement them, but it is doable. It's just a question of priority. We will launch soon Google Talk. We already have Skype, so we'll have Google Talk. So that means that people from Google Talk will be able to call in and conference in Skype people and mobile users and build conferences as they wish. So that will become available, and hopefully all the communities will open up, and it's going to be easier and easier to just meld them together. Some communities are harder to address because they have much stricter licenses, agreements and stuff, but we're trying to get them more open and to make exactly what you were saying. So.
Just also comment on your question, there are initiatives going on to do this kind of stuff. I'll take one example of what Voxbone is working on. We've created, since the last 2 years, together with the ITU, a new country code that will be, it's called INUM. It will be reachable from all the major IM and IP networks, and then also the more traditional PSTN network. So it's a way to have a phone number that you can that people can use to call you on, typically for free from some networks and for very cheap from other networks. It's a way that's to really combine, to aggregate all these different networks together. But there are also other initiatives. For example, if you look at peer-to-peer SIP, that might be also a standard that might come out. It's supported by companies like Nokia and some other big ones. The idea there is to make a standard alternative to Skype. So there are some initiatives going on too.
So we keep hearing about service providers and opening up to the software guys so that we can have new innovative applications. What kind of things are the software guys looking for the service providers to give you?
aside from the obvious chance to make money?
Can you repeat? I didn't understand the whole question. Can you repeat?
Sure. What do you want service providers to give you access to specifically that will, unleash the next wave of innovative applications? Assuming, we want to cooperate with you guys and all of that, what do we actually provide you?
What do service providers need to provide to the developers?